Hey guys, Robbie here. So today I wanted to share a really nice but different sort of view of the modes of the major scale. This is one which you may not have thought about before. We're going to restructure these modes in order of brightest to darkest. So first, I think it's important to mention that the term bright or dark in music, when applied specifically to harmony, is a relative thing. For example, a singular chord or scale isn't bright or dark until it is compared to a different chord or scale. Let's quickly recap the modes of the parent scale C major. As we know, we've got C Ionian, D Dorian, E Phrygian, F Lydian, G Mixolydian, A Aeolian, and B Locrian. So other than having pretty names, each of these scales or modes have a totally different character. This is because if we view each degree of the scale as the root, then we get a different intervallic structure from that chosen root. So even though each mode uses the same notes which come from the C major scale, it's the different intervallic structures which give each mode its unique sound. However, for this video, I'm going to assume that you know what the modes are and how they're constructed and where you'd use them. What we're going to look at is seeing these modes on a musical bright to dark spectrum. So how do we determine what's brighter or darker? Generally, the term brighter means that a note has been raised or sharpened, and darker means a note has been lowered or flattened. So let's use the circle of fifths as a tool to help us understand the spectrum of bright to dark in harmony. If C is our reference point, then a simple way to visualize it is to say if we move clockwise around the circle, we're moving in a brighter direction. And if we move anti-clockwise, then we're moving in a darker direction. For example, G major is a brighter scale than C major because one of the scale degrees is raised, the F to F sharp. Also, look at how the notes have moved in a clockwise position, or really I should say that you can see the G major has more notes to the right in the clockwise position than C major does. So when you compare these two scales, we can also say that C major is darker than G. If we look at D major, which is the next level of brightness, we now have two notes raised from C major, so it's 2 degrees brighter. Again, as you can see, it has even more notes which are further clockwise around the circle. If we now look at F major instead, you can see that the notes of the scale are more towards the anti-clockwise direction, as the B is flattened to a B flat. So F major is 1 degree darker than C major. This works for chords too. For example, a C minor triad is darker than a C major triad because one of the notes, E flat, has been flattened from an E. Also, a C minor triad is found within major scales which are darker than C major, so such as B flat major, E flat major, and A flat major. Something I should bring up which might raise some questions is, at what point does the next major key become darker than C instead of brighter when moving all the way around the circle in a clockwise direction? Basically, the question is F sharp major brighter or darker than C major? Well, it's equally brighter and equally darker because you could see it as both having 6 degrees which have been sharpened, or also see it as having 6 degrees which have been flattened. So C major to F sharp major is a tritone away, and a tritone is as far as you can move away from a key. So I don't really see this change as essentially brighter or darker, but instead I just see this as a huge change in harmony. So now that we understand the deep theory of raising or lowering a scale degree, let's reorder the modes. Instead of viewing the modes from each scale degree of C major, let's instead view each mode with the fixed root of C, because this is going to really clearly let us see the different characteristics or interval structures, and it's also going to allow us to place them in this new bright to dark order. So the brightest, or our first mode in this new order, is actually going to be C Lydian. This is because it's 1 degree brighter than C major, or C Ionian. So if we now go on in the order of brightest to darkest, each mode is going to be 1 degree darker than the previous one. Or in other words, a specific note will get flattened each time to become the next mode. So our next mode would be C Ionian, because if we flatten one of the notes of C Lydian, the sharp 4, then we get C Ionian. The next note we would flatten would now be the 7th, which gives us the C Mixolydian mode. We then flatten the 3rd, which gives us C Dorian, and then the 6th, which now gives us C Aeolian. For the next mode, we flatten the 2nd, which gives us C Phrygian, and then finally we flatten the 5th, which gives us C Locrian. So that's the modes in order of brightest to darkest, so C Lydian to C Locrian. However, we can still carry on because there's one scale degree which we haven't flattened yet, the root. So if we flatten our root note, which is C, then we actually get another Lydian scale, but this time in a new key which is a semitone below the previous key, so C flat Lydian, or B Lydian. We can then start the cycle again until we get to B Locrian, and then we would change the key again and do this cycle until we get through all the keys in this new order. This is an example of where this concept of a bright to dark spectrum works perfectly because it consistently gets darker by 1 degree each time. We can actually see this clearly on the cycle of fifths too, because C Lydian is the 4th mode of G major, which is 1 degree brighter than C Ionian. After C Ionian we had C Mixolydian, which is the same notes as F major. And then C Dorian, well, that's the same as B flat major, or it comes from B flat major. It continues like this even when we get to the next key of B Lydian, because that's the same notes as G flat or F sharp major. So this all works perfectly in this context, however, it isn't always the case when applying it to other parent scales and their modes. But we can still apply this view to other things in music. For example, we could put all our dominant chord or dominant scale options in a rough order of brightness 2. This is cool because it may result in seeing an order of different levels of tension options when choosing what kind of dominant tension we want to apply to a dominant 5 chord. This is actually something I'll definitely do a whole separate video on. So do what you will with this nice bit of theory, but what I will say is that the reason I like this concept and reordering the modes like this is because, well, it kind of stops us thinking about avoid notes. For example, a lot of the time in music, we're told that the 4th degree in the major scale or Ionian mode is a note that we want to avoid or not linger on. However, by seeing the modes ordered in this way, it really emphasizes that note as being a really essential one, which is a big part of Ionian's distinctive sound or characteristic. I mean, this thought process definitely makes me improvise and play differently when using this mode. This concept is also nice because it gets us thinking of Lydian as being the sort of first mode or parent scale. And this opens up the door to using Lydian as a reference point to help find the color tone for each mode, which will help us quickly find the triad pairs and also allow us to have a good system for recognizing slash chords which imply sounds from these modes. Again, I'll definitely do a separate video just dedicated to that as well. So I hope this gives you guys something to be creative with. There's loads of things in music which we can apply this bright to dark concept to, and it's only going to help connect us to the sounds of a series of scales or chord options. Just remember that it's all relative, and even though something in theory is technically brighter, the sound is still going to be a subjective thing. However, this concept can still help us with our understanding of music theory, as well as be a nice tool for composition, and it might just help you generate some cool new ideas. I'd love to hear it if you guys have any more thoughts on this or have dabbled with this concept in other areas of music, so let me know in the comments. But yeah, that's all for today. As always, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and subscribe. And also, if you want to support the channel, then there's some links in the description which you can check out too. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.